Welcome back. So I wanted to do kind of a look back over this year's NHL hockey news, just in general, and I wanted to use what the most popular videos on the channel for this year were. Okay, so this is the last 365 days of 2021, a year which we're kind of glad to see in the rearview mirror. Off you go, 2022, got to be better. I would argue 2021 was better than 2020, mildly. 2022 has to get better. Right, so fingers crossed on that. The most popular video on the channel, Ovechkin's chase of Gretzky. This is honestly, it is the biggest story in hockey, period. And I understand there's people who are tired of it. I understand there are people who don't think he's going to make it, and it's this ridiculous big deal being made of it. But nobody will ever threaten the record again. There is not going to be a time where somebody gets this close and looks like they could do it again. I really don't think there will be. As much as I like some of the goal scorers that are coming up, and maybe Michkov will eventually beat that. I'll be in my 60s by the time that happens, if that happens, maybe even 70s. So, you can come back in 20 plus years and talk to me about it if you want. But the Ovechkin Gretzky chase video I posted on November 15th, immediate, just huge takeoff, which is why I limit that to only like once a year at most, because I know it's something that's interesting, but you have to be able to come at it where the numbers have changed significantly from the last time you talked about it. So yeah, number one. The number two video on the channel from May 31st was reviewing Game 7 between Montreal and Toronto, and I was not impressed with Toronto in that game. And then you watch the All or Nothing special on Amazon Prime, that little mini series, and you can see just how much psychologically that team struggled with basically playing against demons of their own. And Paul McLean had some really good quotes towards the end of that there about how their demons are their own. And so that video being very popular is why when Toronto Maple Leafs fans say he's always happy when the Leafs are unsuccessful. Yes, my second most popular video of the entire year is the Leafs losing in Game 7 of the first round. Oh, I would hate it if they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final, and what that would do for views on the channel. Because that's the reality of it, is that I know that videos that have Toronto in them are going to get more views. And yeah, so that was kind of the ultimate example of that, because it's only round one. The number 3 video was actually a live stream, the 2021 NHL Draft first round. That was on July 23rd. Interestingly enough, the unrestricted free agency this year, not anywhere to be found. This year's free agency, it doesn't feel like had the same oomph as other years. We may have just been kind of out of it at that point, because you have the entry draft, which is huge, and then you have the expansion draft, and then you have free agency, and it just might have been too much in the same period of time, right? So the entry draft was interesting. July 23rd, as I said, it's always a very popular video, is the rewatching of that. Now, Montreal's draft pick likely ends up fueling that. I haven't talked about Montreal's draft pick and how he's free to come back to hockey, because in all honesty, there's enough controversial topics going on at this point, and he hasn't even come back and played yet. I don't know. And again, then you get into that whole debate about, okay, so how long is long enough for issues like what happened with Logan Mailloux? And there are people who will say there isn't, and then there's people who are going to say he's already paid that price. And so, yeah, I know that's part of the reason why this one ended up being as popular as it was, right? So number 4, my honest take on all 32 teams, which was April 13th. The 32 teams videos, and again, and I throw this out there because I know there's a lot of people that ask, like, well, how does this work with YouTube? You can't go back to the well too much. 32 team videos can be very popular, but I have to make sure I space them out, and I have to make sure there's something unique each time around. And my honest take on all 32 teams on April 13th is kind of one of those, I can do this once a year kind of things, right? I can, after this regular season's done and the postseason's done, I can do an honest take on all teams. And my take on Vancouver is going to be a little different, and it would be different right now than what it was in April, guaranteed. But yeah, so I knew that one was going to be popular. Number 5 is reviewing Seattle's expansion picks on July 21st. What's interesting is the same day, the number 7 video of the entire year was Seattle's expansion picks being leaked. What I thought was funny was there were people that on the 21st said, well, this proves nobody's going to care who Seattle actually takes. This is just going to kill that whole thing. And then the number 5 videos reviewing the picks that people on the video that number 7 said nobody was going to care about. So that was a day that was ridiculous. That was an absolute, and then that was followed by the expansion draft, and that was after the entry draft. July was absolutely bonkers for the channel. And July 30th, the number 6 rated video in the year, which might have been because it was buoyed through all these other really popular videos, was me saying which teams I felt had improved in the offseason or not to that stage. Because the offseason was very short, right? So that short offseason, which is easy to forget now, like I was thinking about it today, and the regular season started on January 15th, right, in 2021. They had a 56-game season, and they got her all done, and they got the regular season started by October. Now we're panicking about whether or not they're going to get an 82-game season in, but teams have less than 56 games to get scheduled. It's currently January 1st. I think they'll get it done. I'm being optimistic. Now, number 8 on the board is not an optimistic topic. It is Evander Kane being bankrupt. Now, Evander Kane videos always garner a lot of attention, both from people who love Evander Kane and people who love to see him fail or think that he's failing, right? So Evander Kane is very divisive. It feels like he's divisive within all hockey communities, maybe even within the locker room of teams he plays for, right? So that video of him being bankrupt, it was the start of a really tumultuous year for Kane, right? And of course, there was now going through the divorce and all these other discussions of what he may or may not have done and the faked card and all of this stuff with Kane. And then he ends up in the AHL. That's the only video, though, that's in the top 10. And none of the other videos end up being really noteworthy in the months underneath here. So yeah, for me, Kane being bankrupt January 11th, that's the only real mention I need to make of it, because that's where everything starts. And then everything else after is just this cavalcade of, didn't see that coming. And now there's the question of, does Seattle trade him? Do they retain half his salary? Where does he go? All that fun stuff. Number 9 is Vegas trading Fleury. This was coming years before it finally happened, where the Vegas Golden Knights wanted that cap relief. Right now they have Jack Eichel coming back into the lineup. That puts them $10 million over the cap. They'll just move somebody. They have no problem with trading out draft picks to get rid of guys. Dodonov's probably gone. And I hate to say it because I know he's very popular with Vegas fans, but it's probably going to be Riley Smith, who's a UFA this summer. But that cap hit of $5 million, combined with the cap hit for Dodonov, to get Eichel in the lineup, that's probably what you do. Now, Pacioretty being out for an extended period means you don't have to do that right away, but eventually you do. So yeah, Vegas trading Fleury was big news, and I think that it was handled poorly by the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think Fleury's always been a good teammate, and I think he has nothing to not hold his head up about the way he was in Vegas and on the way he was on the exit. And then, of course, he decides to go to Chicago after some debatable whether or not he'd actually play for the Hawks. And then the number 10 video on here is related to number 3, me reviewing round 1 of the draft. That's on July 25th. July 23rd, of course, is the live stream for the first round of the draft. And it's interesting because in reviewing that first round, I'm able to give more of a take than I can during the live stream of the first round. Live streams at this point, because of the channel's size, I'm usually just answering questions. I don't have that much time for reactions to things I'm watching. The reactions are usually in the reviews. So, yeah. So that's the top 10. Now, getting into each month of the season. January, Line A gets traded. And that was a huge trade at the time. Still is. If you look for who the winner is, right now you would say probably Winnipeg because of Dubois' bounce-back season. But then you look at Line A, the last couple of games for Columbus, he's looked pretty good. So we'll see. And NBC Sportsnet being shut down. So the NBC Sports Network being shut down was big news in January. They still have the regional hockey games. Philadelphia, San Jose still has NBC. I'm trying to think of who else uses NBC. They might be the only two. No, I think doesn't Washington use NBC as well? Anyways, there are still a few, but it's not the same, right? So that being shut down was kind of big news. February, Arizona. Arizona's been in the news a lot of the year, right? And the issues with Arizona in February were internal reports that Katie Strang reported out about how the organization was run and how some people didn't really like how the organization was run, and all these comments about owing money here and there. And then, of course, Arizona basically tried to dispute the whole thing, and that's not true, and none of that's true. And that's kind of the storyline we've had throughout the season, that something happens, and then Arizona basically says there's nothing to see here, which, right? And then there was the epic Leafs meltdown versus Ottawa. Ottawa had a huge lead on Toronto, or Toronto had a huge lead on Ottawa, and it all fell apart. Ottawa came back and they won that game in overtime. And that was one of the most popular videos that month. That was one of the most popular talking points. I think that was also one of the most popular videos of the year for Steve Dangle as well. March, Tim Peel. The infamous live mic moment with Tim Peel, right? Where he ends up losing his job. I follow Tim Peel now on Twitter. We've talked back and forth a little bit on Twitter, but I honestly think he said out loud what referees aren't supposed to say out loud. That's kind of a known thing. And I think it's still a topic we're going to hear about a lot over the coming years, right? Because there's always that discussion of officiating. So the Tim Peel incident takes that officiating discussion and puts it into overdrive. So thanks, Tim. That was the most popular video in March. Sabres falling apart was also a popular topic because it happens again, right? Sabres. Looks like they're going to get it together, and then they don't. And, of course, they had to get shut down. That was a Devils... Sabres game that just both teams ended up getting shut down over, and then it just all fell apart for both teams after that. So the Sabres falling apart, that annual discussion. This year we bypass it because Sabres decide to tear things down in the offseason, right? April, the trade deadline was a popular topic during April, and what happened and who got moved and who didn't. And I made a video on who I felt was Hall of Fame worthy. And I've had people say you should do an updated version of that. I think it was 3 years in between videos. I don't really think that it's a video that I can do every 6 months, every year. I think that's something you have to, because somebody's Hall of Fame credentials really shouldn't change that much over a 6-month period or even a year. To me, Hall of Fame is that long-term discussion. So I think the big topic's going to be who gets hosed the next time they announce Hall of Fame inductees, because they didn't have any inductees this year. So there won't be a Hall of Fame class that backs up some more guys that were first-time eligible, and the snubs are going to be even more dramatic than usual when next year they announce, unless they make a change to who's allowed in, how many are allowed in, because of the year they didn't do Hall of Fame inductions. But yeah, we'll see what happens there, right? In May, the Rangers made news by firing John Davidson as well as Gorton, which was a shocker. The Rangers missed the playoffs, but they played well. They had a decent season. They were in a really brutal division, and I was really surprised to see everybody get fired. And this is where we start hearing about Eichel maybe being on his way out, not being happy. And that was the speculation that ran years before that of Eichel doesn't look happy. Is Eichel happy? Is Eichel going to want out? And in May of 2021, it becomes obvious he wants out. He's not happy. June, the Eichel trade talk really builds up of, okay, so what are they going to get back? And of course, you can only trade a guy once, and we'll see whether or not Buffalo got back enough. But it was tough because he's injured, so you're trading an injured property, which Buffalo, at least in the beginning, seemed to think, doesn't matter, we know what he is at his best, so we'll try to trade him and get back trade value of what he would be if he was healthy and in the lineup, which other teams balked at. Also, other teams not wanting to let him get the surgery that he wanted that had never been given to an NHL player before. But as of the time I'm recording this, I believe two hockey players have had it. Eichel was the first, not the last. And now it's going to become one of those surgeries guys just get, because that's how that turns out. So the Leafs being eliminated was topic as well. That was very popular, where I tried to look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and how are they going to fix this. And again, when you talk about Toronto, it's going to be a popular thing. You just have to spread that out and make sure there's new info. New info is really important. July was the month of the Coyotes Canucks trade. That was the most popular topic that month. And it still is, because the topic of, okay, so what the Canucks gave up, and there's still draft picks that they gave to Arizona that Arizona hasn't used yet, that they can then use to get other assets. Was it too much? The OEL contract, how bad is that going to age for Vancouver? They pick up Garland, but now that they've picked up Garland, does that mean they lose Besser? Because Besser's qualifying offer is $7.5 million. And because you're paying all that money to Ekman Larsson and Garland, that's a combined over $11 million in cap hit, you can't keep Besser. So there's a lot of interesting discussions still to be had about Vancouver this coming year. August. Kotkaniemi offer sheet right at the end of the month. Near the end of the month. And would Montreal match? And right away, it was no. Montreal's not going to match $6.1 million for Kotkaniemi. And of course, there's the $20 bonus that's in there because of the Aho offer sheet that Montreal gave. And the other big news in August was that Glendale was evicting the Coyotes, which still to this point is being seen as maybe kind of some saber rattling. Maybe they don't really mean it. They actually want a long-term contract with the Coyotes, or to hell with it, they don't care. They want the Coyotes out. Could be one, could be the other. No idea. We'll see this year. We'll probably have a better idea towards the end of towards the end of this season, off season. We'll figure it out. They might be playing some roller hockey in a parking lot in Arizona next year. Who knows? That might be kind of fun. But Glendale evicting the Coyotes was big news, right? And the idea that they've been having trouble paying bills and this and that, which goes back to February to that discussion. September, the Habs do not match. Kotkaniemi goes to Carolina. Off he goes. Kotkaniemi so far in Carolina, I would say he's been okay. I don't think he's been as good as necessarily they want him to be at that $6.1 million price point. But do I think the Habs miss him? Yes. On some level, I think the Habs miss him. Did they make the right decision not matching? Yes. I don't think the $6.1 million would be worth that for the Montreal Canadiens. It's a one-year contract too, so they would have been in the same position next summer. But then there was Olympic roster speculation, which I held off on because I wasn't sure that the NHL was actually going to go. Just with the climate being as it is and everything else that's going on in the world around us, I wasn't sure that they'd actually go. While the NHL was gritting their teeth and allowing NHL players to go if they had to, they really would rather they didn't. So I was wondering, but the video I did on the Canadian Olympic team, which now we'll never know whether or not that would have been anywhere near accurate, was a very popular video. And the Habs picking up Christian Dvorak from the Arizona Coyotes, and using a draft pick they got from Carolina in the Kotkaniemi deal as part of how they get Dvorak out of Arizona, as Arizona sells everybody, which left Jeff Chikrin kind of on an island there with Kessel and Garland. And the guys who were left in Arizona, I feel for them, I really do, because basically Arizona just had a big sale of everybody, much like Buffalo did, and there you go. October is highlighted by the final nail in the coffin for Stan Bowman. People might have looked at Stan Bowman's trade record or whatever other record and said his best days might be behind him, or maybe he was overrated to begin with, or whatever it was. But Bowman is fired at the end of the Blackhawks investigation into the whole Brad Aldrich scandal. That scandal had been percolating, and Rick Westhead doing fantastic reporting on it throughout. The Blackhawks, of course, there were some PR nightmares that the Hawks had this year. Obviously, this is beyond a PR nightmare, but there were others as well. The draft where they had all these women up there with them, and I was like, what's with the? I mean, that's weird, right? And then of course Quenneville ends up losing his job in Florida. A lot of discussion about that, whether or not Quenneville's going to coach again. And Robin Leonard made a lot of news by speaking out about, well, just trainers and what teams get away with and teams don't, and what he may know and what he may not. And a lot of this was him backing up Jack Eichel because he felt that the Buffalo Sabres were hosing over his buddy Jack, who was still in Buffalo. So interestingly enough, of course, Eichel in November is traded to Vegas, where he's now teammates with Robin Leonard. And I'm sure Eichel appreciates Leonard speaking out. It's not something I think that Eichel would have done, but Leonard speaks out immediately. The NHL, of course, they didn't put a gag order on him exactly, but they're like, yeah, come talk to us. Rather than sending everything out on Twitter, because he threatened, like, every day I'm going to give you a new story. And it's like, nope. The NHL cut that off right away. So Eichel's traded. Bergevin is fired by the Montreal Canadiens after a disastrous start to the season. And Jeremy Colliton is fired by the Chicago Blackhawks after a really disastrous start to the season for them too, after they went out and they got Seth Jones, they got Marc-Andre Fleury, and there was a belief that Chicago would be better, which they really have not been to this point in the season. Then we get into last month, December, right? Benning and Green out. And what finally did it is that the fans were able to vocalize their displeasure in person. The banners, all the things they were trying to do, protests and things of that nature. Really, I mean, the owner notices that stuff, but it's something else when you have a whole arena or even half of an arena chanting to get the GM fired and the coach fired. So that happens. They bring in Bruce Boudreau, and the Canucks go on a bit of a run. And by a bit of a run, I mean 7-game winning streak, which is ended by the LA Kings. I was there for the first 2 games of that winning streak, so I'm not going to claim total credit, but I'm not saying I get no credit. But yeah, Vigneault was also fired by the Philadelphia Flyers after they got off to a disastrous start to their season after remaking their defense. And Carter Hart, relatively decent bounce back for him after what was a miserable 2021 season. So outside of these, there's other things I wanted to talk about too, because I know there's a lot that's happened this year, right? The protocol shutdowns that take place mostly throughout December, and the early Christmas that the players get, that early Christmas break. And I'm going to be honest, I think a 1-week break at Christmas is a fantastic idea. I've often thought they could take a break from New Year's Eve or from Christmas Eve until the 30th, come back on New Year's Eve, have a full slate of games, and then on the 1st of January, you have your Winter Classic, and then on the 2nd of January, you can have a full slate of games again. I've thought that for a long time. You could make that work. I think a full week off for Christmas would be nice. 3 days off for Christmas, but I think a full week off would be nice for just for them in general. So I don't think that'll ever happen, but I'm just throwing that out there. The World Junior Championship, of course, being postponed/canceled. That only happens a couple days ago, but this is a year in review, so that absolutely belongs here. And whether it's a protocol setup that was the problem, whatever it was, there were 4 cases. They shut it down. The next day, they announced there were 5 more. There's going to be a whole bunch more. And so they saw that. They went, yep, this is going to spread. This is just going to end up with a bunch of forfeitures. So it is considered postponed. The Women's Junior Championship, of course, considered canceled, but now it might be postponed till the summer. I don't know. And I've looked at the World Championships in this light before myself. They have the World Championship, of course, which is in, April, which is fine. All the European leagues are winding down, but the NHL's not. So a lot of the North American players that get over to play, they're on teams that miss the playoffs, right? So I've always thought that the World Championships, if they had a way to do it during the summer, you could have like super teams. And then maybe all this Olympic talk and how guys didn't get to represent their country, that might be diluted a little bit if the World Championship was really seen as a best-on-best tournament every year, where you could have a lot of the best Canadian, best American players. I don't know how that would work, but again, if they had it during the summer, you could have super teams, and it could be a lot of fun to watch. As it is now, the World Championships, a lot of time, I just don't have time because the NHL's still running a full schedule, and the World Championships, especially if they're in Europe, they're at a time that's just not convenient for me to be able to see it without having to be up about 24 hours a day, which doesn't work. Now, of course, with the 2021 season, which we're already referring to as the 2020-2021 season, people don't argue with that as much now as they did in this month of last year, where they said, no, it's just the 2021 season. That looks weird. So they officially refer to it as the 2020-2021 season. And of course, we had the North Division because there was no cross-border play. Where we're at right now, there is cross-border play that's allowed. The NHL, of course, delaying a lot of Canadian games in January, which was announced in December because they want to make sure that they're making as much money off the games as possible. And with restricted attendance, they're not going to make anywhere near the same amount of money. Because if they don't make that money back, players owe more money to the owners than initially thought by the NHL. The NHL in December, and it's not on the board, but I think they shot themselves in the foot by speculating. So the cap should go up by $1 million next year Don't speculate on what the cap could, might, should do next year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, because that's what got them into the cap hell that they're in now. Before everything fell apart in 2020, the belief was that salary cap's just going to keep going up. So a lot of the contracts that were signed with the idea that, okay, the cap's going to keep going up, so these contracts are going to be a bargain. And they're not. So hopefully GMs, no, they're going to spend all their money. They're going to spend money they don't have, and we're going to be back here again, because that's how that works. The best part is that if enough GMs spend money that they don't have, Gary Bettman comes out and says, those greedy players, it's all their fault. It's so weird. It's so odd. Like I've said, if you ask your boss for $40 an hour and everybody else on the floor is making 10, so everybody else on the floor comes in and goes, I want $40, and the boss goes, I guess you're all making $40 an hour. If they go out of business through that, then that's their own. It's not on the guys who asked for it. The GMs are allowed to say no. When a player says, I want $10 million a year, they're allowed to say, not worth it. You have to look at how much that player is actually worth. I know it's something that works in baseball. I know it's something that works in other sports. And I sometimes think that NHL GMs are a little behind the curve on it, where we'll look at a contract and we'll say, that guy's getting way more than he should. All right. The Bolts repeat over the Montreal Canadiens. And of course, yes, they're $18 million over the cap, including Gaborik and Nilsson, who didn't play a minute at all during the entire season. But that's cap money. That's dead cap that they had picked up from the Ottawa Senators so they could stay under the actual cap. And of course, the Kucherov injury, the big, brouhaha over that. And it's overshadowing everything to a point where even though Tampa Bay right now is not over the cap, and if everybody's healthy and in the lineup, they're not over the cap, people still complain, oh, Tampa's going to be over the cap again. Here they come. And it's going to be a conversation for years. It really is. And now it's going to be a bunch of teams, even though about half of the league, if it wasn't for LTIR, would in fact be over the salary cap. About half of them. Price being exposed was a big storyline, right? So Carey Price being exposed by the Montreal Canadiens. Well, he hasn't played a game yet this year. So the speculation that he was going to miss a large portion of the season, even though it wasn't for the reason that was speculated, it turns out to be accurate. Also, Shea Weber, done so far. Yeah, he apparently is done. So that was the big news coming out of that Stanley Cup final, where Montreal makes their run to the finals, and then Price and Weber are out. And immediately you're thinking, what's next? And what was next was that they lose Danault in free agency, which is huge. I still think that's bigger than some people made a deal of at the time. And I think that really hurt them. Danault was a really important forward. Weber was a minute-munching defenseman. And Price was a huge part of the reason they went to the Stanley Cup final. The Islanders' nightmarish homestand after a 13-game road trip. So UBS Arena gets opened, and the Islanders, by the time they get home, they were 5-6-2, and it just got worse because, of course, they had the outbreak on their team. They ended up playing without 7 or 8 guys, and then they get shut down, and then they come back. And it's been an absolute one nightmare after another. Right now, it looks like they might be turning it around. It's still early enough in the season that they can certainly try, but it's going to be a challenge for them. And Zegras with the fantastic pass. Milano bats it in the net. Fantastic highlight reel goal. That, of course, Tortorella said, that's great. We need more of that kind of creativity in the NHL. I approve. And the Ducks. The Ducks, their resurrection from being an also-ran for years. Right now, I mean, without Zegras, who's currently in protocols, I'm recording this, that makes things tougher. But still, the fact that they're in the hunt, the fact they're only 3 points out of first place in their division, that's kind of a win. Rask retiring, I've got that with the question mark because he's been working out with the Bruins. He is coming back. He's coming back. It's one of the worst kept secrets ever. I can see Tuukka running there. Hey guys, I'm back. Yeah. Aren't you guys excited? Yep, we knew. And we knew. We knew you've been with us for weeks, dude. We knew you were coming back. So, yeah, Rask retiring, maybe. Now, I've got the Prime Green on the board. Prime Green jerseys, which I don't think people have made a big a deal about, as I think they maybe should. So, the Prime Green jerseys come out, which is a new style of jersey from Adidas. It's kind of a throwback to the old style. The material for the logos has been changed to 3D textures. It's just like old CCM and old jerseys. I I can go through my collection and show like 3D texturing from jerseys from 20, 30 years ago. But what's interesting is I don't like the material as much, and I think it's more likely to buckle or to have issues. And so, again, bubbling, that kind of thing with logos. So the primary jerseys may not be a huge deal right now, but at some point people may notice this as they wear them, and they might be like, hey, actually those Arrow Ready and Climalites are pretty nice, and those may go up in value as they become more rare, as jerseys do on the market. Flames had a building, right? The announcement of a building to replace the Saddle Dome was a very popular video that I had not that long ago. It wasn't 2021, it was before that, but it was a popular video. And now the building project looks like it's dead due to cost overruns, and Flames saying, well, we're not paying for all that, so forget it. And so what happens now? I really don't know. But yeah, the Flames not having a new building, that to me is news, because it was reported a couple years back, if the Flames didn't replace the Saddle Dome, then we could be looking at a situation where the Flames could get moved, which now the storyline's different. Now it's, nope, they're going to stay in the Saddle Dome, everything's fine. So either they were lying then, or they're not necessarily telling 100% truth right now. But either way, it's fascinating. And then UBS Arena opening, which is related to the Islanders' disastrous start to the season. But UBS opening up is nice. And of course, the Climate Pledge Arena out of Seattle, which is the weirdest name. And then, of course, LA goes, you think that's weird? We're going to be crypto.com. Okay, so arena names just keep getting weirder as the corporate sponsors get odder. But it is what it is. And yeah, it's nice to see some new arenas coming in, but it means that then some arenas that I don't think are that old, all of a sudden people are talking about, this is an old arena, it's 25 years old. And yet it doesn't feel like it's that much time to start talking about maybe a replacement, but that's where we're at now. It just feels like replacing buildings is just kind of part of how that works, and there's a certain period of time, and you're like, nope, got to rip that out and put in a new one. And so we'll see which ones come down next. So there you go, 2021. All done, all finished. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite story of 2021 was in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing right through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.